Natalie Wood's death was ruled an accident, but vital evidence simply vanished. Decades later, a family fights for the truth hidden within that missing archive. Dawn broke over the Pacific on Sunday, November 29, 1981, revealing a sight that would forever stain the history of Hollywood. 2 miles off the rugged coastline of Catalina Island, inside a secluded cove known as Blue Cavern, a search and rescue helicopter spotted a flash of bright red bobbing in the dark, undulating surf. It was a down jacket, heavily saturated with seawater, keeping a body barely afloat face down among the kelp. When authorities pulled the victim onto a recovery launch, they recognized the unmistakable features of one of the world's most famous actresses, 43-year-old Natalie Wood. She was clad only in a flannel nightgown, knee-high socks, and that red jacket, her skin marred by bruises that had not yet faded. How does a glamorous, Oscar-nominated film icon end up drowning alone in the freezing ocean in the dead of night? Within hours of the discovery, the official narrative began to crystallize around a tragic, clumsy accident involving a slippery rubber dinghy. Yet, from the very moment her body was pulled from the Pacific, the details refused to fit cleanly into a simple narrative of misadventure. The water was calm, but the circumstances surrounding her final hours aboard her luxury yacht were violently turbulent. Those who knew her intimately expressed immediate, profound skepticism regarding the initial police explanation, pointing out details that made no logical sense. Why would a woman with a well-documented, paralyzing terror of dark water venture out onto a pitching boat ramp alone in the middle of the night? The ocean kept its secrets that morning, leaving investigators to piece together a puzzle where every witness seemed to be guarding a different piece of the truth. As the news flash rippled through television networks across the globe, a web of silence began to tighten around the events of the previous evening. The official investigation would move with surprising speed, closing the case file in less than a month, but the whispers would persist for decades. Was this truly a freak accident born of alcohol and bad luck, or did something far more sinister occur in the shadows of the yacht named Splendor? The unanswered questions began to multiply before the water had even dried on the star's recovered clothing, leaving an unsettling loop that would haunt Hollywood for generations. To understand the tragedy, one must look at the floating stage where the final act occurred, a 60-foot custom motor yacht named the Splendor. Purchased by Natalie Wood and her husband, veteran actor Robert Wagner, the vessel was a symbol of Hollywood opulence, a sleek sanctuary where they could escape the relentless glare of the paparazzi. For the Thanksgiving holiday weekend of 1981, the boat was moored at Isthmus Cove at Catalina Island, carrying a small, highly volatile mix of personalities. On board were 4 individuals: Robert Wagner, the dashing star of television's Heart to Heart, Natalie Wood, his radiant and legendary wife, and Christopher Walken, her brilliant, intense co-star in the upcoming science fiction film Brainstorm. Managing the operations of the yacht was 27-year-old Dennis Davern, a young man who served as the ship's captain, caretaker, and frequent companion to the Hollywood elite. The atmosphere on the Splendor during that late November cruise was described as thick with unexpressed tensions, fueled by an abundance of alcohol. It was no secret in their social circles that the marriage between Wagner and Wood was experiencing a period of renewed strain, exacerbated by professional anxieties. Walken's presence added a complex dynamic to the weekend, as his intense on-screen chemistry with Wood had already sparked rumors in the Hollywood trade papers. Dennis Davern would later recall that the weekend felt less like a holiday vacation and more like a pressure cooker waiting for a spark. The physical layout of the Splendor was intimate, meaning that any disagreement, any raised voice or sharp glance, would resonate through the wood-paneled cabins. Outside, the autumn wind was picking up, chilling the air and causing the yacht to roll gently against its mooring lines. As the sun set on Saturday, November 28, the 4 occupants prepared to go ashore for dinner, unaware that this would be their final collective moments of normalcy. The yacht itself, with its polished brass and dark wood accents, was about to transform from a symbol of luxury into a floating crime scene. What private grievances were packed into those tight quarters alongside the luggage and the champagne? The stage was set, the actors were in place, and the vessel was drifting toward a night from which one of them would never return. Natalie Wood was not just another Hollywood celebrity, she was a cinematic institution who had spent virtually her entire life in front of a camera lens. Born Natalia Nikolaevna Zakharenko to Russian immigrant parents, she was pushed into the studio system as a small child, capturing the heart of the nation in the 1947 holiday classic, Miracle on 34th Street. Unlike many child actors who faded into obscurity, Wood successfully transitioned into complex, adult roles that defined a generation of American cinema. Her performances in Rebel Without a Cause, alongside James Dean, Splendor in the Grass with Warren Beatty, and the monumental musical, West Side Story, earned her 3 Academy Award nominations before she turned 25. She possessed a rare combination of vulnerability and fierce intelligence, projecting an aura of classic Hollywood royalty wherever she went. By 1981, however, the film industry was shifting rapidly, and Wood was fighting hard to maintain her status as a leading lady in a youth-obsessed culture. The film, Brainstorm, was supposed to be her grand cinematic comeback, a high-concept thriller that allowed her to showcase her mature acting capabilities. Her personal life was equally cinematic, highlighted by her dramatic romance with Robert Wagner, whom she married in 1957, divorced in 1962, and remarkably remarried in 1972. Their reconciliation was hailed as one of Hollywood's greatest love stories, a glamorous partnership that seemed indestructible from the outside. Yet, behind the polished public image lay a woman who carried deep-seated anxieties, many of them stemming from a controlling mother and a grueling childhood in the studio system. The stakes for Natalie Wood that weekend were incredibly high, both personally and professionally, as she sought to balance her marriage with her artistic ambitions. This immense stature and complex history meant that her sudden disappearance would not just be a local tragedy, but a seismic shock to the entertainment industry. The woman floating in the water off Catalina was a cultural icon, making the mundane, messy details of her final hours all the more difficult for the public to accept. How could a life so carefully documented and celebrated end in such an unscripted, chaotic manner? The countdown to tragedy began in earnest on the evening of Saturday, November 28th, when the party of 4 left the Splendor to dine ashore at the Doug's Harbor Reef restaurant on Catalina Island. Witnesses at the restaurant later described an evening marked by heavy, continuous drinking and an increasingly uncomfortable atmosphere at the celebrity table. Natalie Wood, Robert Wagner, and Christopher Walken consumed multiple bottles of wine and champagne, their laughter occasionally giving way to long, tense silences. The restaurant staff noticed that the behavior of the group grew progressively more boisterous and argumentative as the hours ticked by. Robert Wagner appeared visibly agitated, his attention frequently locking onto the animated conversation sharing between his wife and her intense young co-star. Natalie, on her part, seemed to be relishing the attention, her mood fluctuating between high-spirited flirtation and sudden flashes of defensive anger. The restaurant manager eventually became so concerned about the group's high level of intoxication that he contacted the local sheriff's department, requesting that they keep an eye on the celebrities as they returned to their boat. Around 10 p.m., the party finally left the restaurant, stepping out into the chilly, wind-swept night to board the small inflatable dinghy that would take them back to the Splendor. Dennis Davern ferried the intoxicated trio across the dark, choppy waters of the harbor, a brief journey that was reportedly filled with tense bickering. By the time they climbed back onto the deck of the luxury yacht, the social veneer that had held the weekend together was entirely frayed. The alcohol had stripped away their Hollywood politeness, leaving raw nerves, jealousy, and long-standing resentments exposed to the cold night air. The captain secured the dinghy to the yacht's stern, unaware that this small rubber craft would soon become the focal point of a global death investigation. What happened immediately after they stepped inside the main cabin remains one of the most fiercely debated sequences of events in modern true crime history, as the door closed on the world outside. Once inside the main salon of the Splendor, the simmering friction between the men finally erupted into an open, aggressive confrontation. According to later disclosures by Captain Dennis Davern, the primary flashpoint was a bitter argument between Robert Wagner and Christopher Walken regarding Natalie Wood's career. Walken reportedly advocated that Wood should focus entirely on her acting talent and pursue theater roles, while Wagner felt this perspective was intrusive and disrespectful to their family life. The debate quickly escalated from a professional disagreement into a deeply personal clash of egos, with voices shouting over the hum of the boat's generator. In a fit of rage, Wagner allegedly picked up a bottle of wine and smashed it violently against a coffee table, showering the cabin with shards of glass and dark liquid. Natalie Wood, mortified and deeply upset by the aggressive behavior of the men, reportedly shouted her disapproval before retreating down the companionway to her private stateroom. The confrontation between Wagner and Walken did not stop immediately, continuing to echo through the tight confines of the vessel while Davern attempted to clean up the broken glass. The captain noted that Wagner was pacing like a caged animal, his anger fueled by jealousy and the heavy consumption of alcohol throughout the night. Walken eventually removed himself from the conflict, retiring to his own guest cabin in an effort to defuse the volatile situation. This left Robert Wagner alone in the central living area, his temper still white-hot, with only the ship's captain witnessing his erratic behavior. What words were exchanged in those final, furious moments before the boat fell into a deceptive, heavy silence? The exact timeline of this critical hour remains blurred by decades of conflicting statements, self-protective narratives, and memory lapses induced by intoxication. The argument had shattered the peace of the yacht, setting off a chain reaction of events that was now moving toward a catastrophic conclusion, hidden from the rest of the world. The timeline of Natalie Wood's disappearance is a labyrinth of uncertainty, with the crucial window occurring between 11 p.m. and midnight. According to the initial statements provided to the police by Robert Wagner, he went to their stateroom around 11:45 p.m. to say goodnight to his wife, only to find the room empty. He noted that the yacht's small inflatable dinghy, named the Valiant, was also missing from its usual tying position at the swim platform at the stern. Wagner deduced that Natalie had simply taken the rubber boat out for a solo joyride or had used it to escape the tense atmosphere on the yacht to seek shore accommodation. However, this explanation immediately ran aground when scrutinized by those who knew the actress's deep psychological aversion to open, dark water. Natalie Wood was so terrified of drowning that she refused to swim in the ocean and was highly uncomfortable even around home swimming pools, a phobia she spoke about publicly. The idea that she would voluntarily step onto a wet, slippery swim platform in a silk nightgown, untie a heavy rope, and pilot a motorized dinghy into a pitch-black, choppy ocean was entirely unthinkable to her close friends. Dennis Davern later claimed that during this critical window, he heard a loud disturbance near the back of the boat but was explicitly told by Wagner to stay in his quarters. The captain asserted that Wagner appeared highly agitated but refused to allow him to turn on the yacht's powerful searchlights to look for her. For hours, no official distress call was placed, and no alerts were sent to the Coast Guard or nearby vessels anchored in the bay. The inhabitants of the Splendor remained cloistered in the dark, while outside, a Hollywood legend was missing in the freezing Pacific currents. Why was there such a profound delay in seeking help for a woman who had vanished into the night? The silence on the yacht during those midnight hours remains one of the most chilling and inexplicable aspects of the entire mystery. The discovery of the yacht's inflatable dinghy, the Valiant, added another layer of profound confusion to the unfolding tragedy. Early Sunday morning, search crews located the small rubber craft drifted against the rocks of the Catalina shoreline, several hundred yards away from where Natalie's body would eventually be found. The dinghy's ignition key was turned to the off position, the gear shift was in neutral, and the oars remained securely tied down inside the vessel, unused. This physical evidence strongly indicated that the boat's outboard motor had never been started or utilized that night, contradicting any theory that Natalie had actively piloted it away. Furthermore, investigators discovered that the canvas cover over the outboard engine was still securely fastened, an unlikely scenario for someone attempting a midnight escape. If Natalie Wood had not used the dinghy to travel to shore, how did both she and the craft end up detached from the Splendor? One prominent theory suggested that she had noticed the dinghy banging loudly against the yacht's hull due to the rough chop and had gone out to tighten the knot. In this scenario, she slipped on the fiberglass platform, fell into the water, and pulled the dinghy's mooring line loose as she went down. Yet, her family and friends vehemently rejected this idea, stating she would have called for the captain to fix a noisy line rather than risk her safety. Another troubling detail emerged from witnesses on a nearby vessel, who reported hearing a woman crying out for help in the darkness around 11:30 p.m. The cries went uninvestigated, as the occupants of that boat assumed it was simply late-night revelers from the island's resort bars. The silent, drifting dinghy stood as a mute witness to a sequence of events that clearly did not align with a routine departure. The physical state of the rubber craft pointed toward a sudden, chaotic incident rather than an intentional, controlled action by the actress. When the body of Natalie Wood was thoroughly examined by the Los Angeles County Medical Examiner's Office, the findings raised immediate, disturbing questions. Chief Medical Examiner Thomas Noguchi noted that the actress's body was covered in numerous superficial bruises, particularly on her arms, wrists, and thighs. There was also a minor abrasion on her left cheek, suggesting some form of physical impact before she entered the water or during her struggle. The autopsy revealed that her blood alcohol level was 0.14%, well above the legal driving limit, along with traces of a motion sickness pill and a painkiller. The official cause of death was determined to be drowning, with hypothermia playing a massive, rapid role due to the 57-degree water temperature. The heavy red down jacket she was wearing had become completely waterlogged, weighing her down like an anchor and making it impossible to climb back into a drifting dinghy. Noguchi concluded that the bruises were entirely consistent with a person slipping on a boat ramp, falling into the ocean, and desperately trying to claw her way back aboard a slick rubber craft. However, forensic experts later noted that the pattern of bruises on her upper arms could also be interpreted as defensive wounds or marks from being forcefully grabbed. The absence of any head trauma or skull fractures suggested she was fully conscious when she entered the ocean, left to face her worst nightmare in the pitch black. Why did she not cry out louder, or if she did, why did the men on the Splendor fail to hear her over the sound of the wind? The physical evidence was a canvas of ambiguity, allowing for two wildly divergent interpretations: a clumsy, alcohol-induced slip, or a violent struggle that ended in the sea. The marks on her skin spoke of a desperate battle for survival, but they remained frustratingly silent about how that battle truly began. In the immediate aftermath of the tragedy, the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department conducted what many would later criticize as a superficial investigation. Driven by a desire to avoid a prolonged, sensationalized Hollywood scandal, authorities seemed eager to accept the simplest explanation available. On December 11, 1981, less than 2 weeks after the star's body was recovered, the death of Natalie Wood was officially ruled an accidental drowning. The coroner's report suggested that she had slipped while attempting to board the dinghy to escape the noise or to secure a loose line, fell into the ocean, and succumbed to the cold. Robert Wagner and Christopher Walken provided consistent, brief statements to investigators, reinforcing the narrative of a tragic mishap born of an unfortunate slip. The case was formally closed, the files stamped resolved, and the Hollywood community attempted to process the shocking loss of one of its brightest lights. Natalie Wood was laid to rest at Westwood Village Memorial Park Cemetery, her funeral attended by a constellation of stars, including a visibly devastated Robert Wagner. To the public, it appeared to be the heartbreaking end of a legendary life, a tragic reminder of the dangers of the sea. Yet, beneath the surface of the official closure, a profound sense of unease continued to linger among those who knew the intimate details. Journalists and independent investigators pointed out massive gaps in the official timeline and noted that critical witnesses had been interviewed only briefly. The speed with which the ruling was handed down left an impression that the full story had been bypassed in favor of convenience. For 30 years, this accidental ruling would stand as the final, official word on the matter, but the narrative was built on a foundation of shifting sand. The case was asleep, but it was far from dead, waiting for a crack to appear in the wall of silence. As the years rolled into decades, the carefully constructed narrative of the 1981 accidental drowning began to show significant structural cracks. Investigative journalists refused to let the story fade, constantly uncovering inconsistencies between the initial police reports and the physical realities of that night. One of the most glaring issues was the extensive delay between the time Natalie went missing and the time the first call for assistance was made. It was revealed that the Splendor did not contact the Coast Guard until 3:30 a.m. on Sunday morning, nearly 4 hours after she was suspected to have vanished. Why would a husband, knowing his wife had a mortal dread of the ocean, wait for hours before alerting professional rescue teams? Furthermore, testimonies from surrounding boats began to gain traction in the public sphere, creating a timeline that directly contradicted Wagner's account. Marilyn Wayne, an author who was anchored on a nearby boat that night, repeated her assertion that she heard a woman screaming for help for over 40 minutes. Wayne claimed that when she attempted to turn on her own spotlight, she was discouraged by her companion, who believed it was just a domestic dispute on a celebrity vessel. The realization that Natalie Wood may have been floating alive, crying out in the dark while those nearby did nothing, added a horrific dimension to the mystery. The cracks in the case were not just about timing, they were about human behavior and the apparent lack of urgency displayed by those on board. The discrepancies suggested that a concerted effort had been made to handle the situation internally before involving outside authorities. This lingering suspicion kept the story alive in the true crime underground, preventing the memory of that night from settling into history as a simple accident. The most significant blow to the original accidental drowning ruling came from inside the yacht itself, specifically from Captain Dennis Davern. For years, Davern had maintained the company line, providing safe, scripted answers to investigators and the media that protected Robert Wagner's public image. However, as time went on, the weight of his conscience and the haunting memories of that night began to erode his loyalty. In 2009, Davern co-authored a book titled Goodbye Natalie, Goodbye Splendor, in which he dropped a series of bombshell revelations about the final hours. He confessed that he had lied to investigators during the initial 1981 inquiry out of fear and intense pressure from Wagner's camp. Davern now claimed that the argument between Wagner and Wood had been far more violent and prolonged than previously admitted, moving from the cabin out onto the deck. He stated that he saw Wagner standing near the stern of the boat immediately after Natalie disappeared, looking remarkably calm and unbothered. Most damningly, Davern alleged that when he pleaded with Wagner to turn on the searchlights or call for help, Wagner flatly refused, telling him to wait. The captain claimed he was essentially held hostage by the situation, forced to participate in a cover-up that began before Natalie's body was even cold. Critics pointed out that Davern's sudden change of heart coincided with a book release, leading some to question his financial motivations. Despite these criticisms, his detailed, first-hand account provided a starkly different narrative that could not be easily ignored by law enforcement. The captain's new story transformed the case from a tragic accident into a potential homicide investigation, pointing the finger directly at the man who loved her most. The wall of silence had been breached, and the water was rushing back in. In November 2011, exactly 30 years after Natalie Wood's death, the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department made a stunning public announcement. Based on substantial new information provided by Captain Dennis Davern and other corroborated witness accounts, the case was officially reopened. Detective Lieutenant John Corina of the Sheriff's Homicide Bureau stated that investigators were taking a fresh look at the entire timeline of that fateful night. The announcement sent shockwaves through Hollywood, thrusting the aging Robert Wagner back into the center of a media firestorm. Detectives admitted that the original 1981 investigation had been handled with a degree of deference that would never be tolerated in modern homicide cases. They began tracking down original witnesses, re-examining forensic files, and utilizing advanced technological tools to analyze ocean currents and sound travel. The public interest in the case skyrocketed, with a new generation becoming fascinated by the glamorous, tragic mystery of the Splendor. Investigators spent months quietly interviewing individuals who had been on Catalina Island that weekend, attempting to separate fact from decades of accumulated myth. Christopher Walken, who had maintained a strict, lifelong policy of never speaking about the incident in interviews, reportedly cooperated fully with the new inquiry. The focus of the investigation narrowed intensely onto the actions of Robert Wagner during that 4-hour delay before the Coast Guard was notified. Detectives made it clear that they were no longer viewing the case through the lens of a simple, unavoidable accident. The reopening of a 30-year-old cold case involving Hollywood royalty was an extraordinarily rare move, indicating that authorities believed the truth had been deliberately suppressed. The ghost of Natalie Wood had returned to the halls of justice, demanding a more thorough accounting of her final moments. The renewed investigation bore its first official fruit in August 2012, when the Los Angeles County Coroner's Office made a profound bureaucratic move. They officially amended Natalie Wood's death certificate, stripping away the definitive, 30-year-old classification of accidental drowning. The new document changed the cause of death to drowning and other undetermined factors, a phrasing that spoke volumes about the shifting medical consensus. Furthermore, the manner of death was altered from accident to undetermined, legally shifting the status of the case into a permanent state of unresolved mystery. A newly released 10-page addendum to the autopsy report revealed the scientific reasoning behind this significant administrative change. Medical examiners noted that several of the bruises found on Wood's body may have occurred before she entered the water, rather than during a struggle to climb into the dinghy. The report explicitly stated that the location and nature of the injuries on her arms and torso could not be definitively explained by a simple fall. This official acknowledgement lent immense credibility to the theories that some form of physical altercation had taken place aboard the yacht before she drowned. Robert Wagner's legal team quickly dismissed the amendment, characterizing it as a sensationalist move driven by media pressure rather than new science. However, for advocates of justice for Natalie, the amended death certificate was a monumental victory that validated decades of suspicion. The state of California had officially declared that it no longer knew how one of its most famous citizens had died. The document was a stark, legally binding admission that the original narrative was fundamentally flawed, leaving the door wide open for darker possibilities. The escalation of the case reached its peak in February 2018, when the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department dropped another bombshell during a television interview. Investigators officially named Robert Wagner, then 87 years old, person of interest, in the death of his wife. Detective Lieutenant John Corina stated bluntly that after years of re-examining the evidence, Wagner was the last person known to be with Natalie before she disappeared. Investigators noted that Wagner's version of events had shifted subtly over the years, and his story simply did not add up when compared to the independent witness statements. They expressed a deep frustration with Wagner's refusal to speak with homicide detectives since the case had been officially reopened in 2011. While being a person of interest is not a formal legal charge, the designation firmly placed Wagner under a cloud of official suspicion. The police narrative now suggested that the domestic argument had likely escalated to the stern of the boat, and that Wagner may have played a direct or passive role in her going overboard. Wagner maintained his absolute innocence, with his representatives releasing statements accusing the sheriff's department of staging a publicity stunt for a television special. Christopher Walken was explicitly cleared of any wrongdoing, with detectives reiterating that he was not a suspect and had been fully cooperative. The designation of Wagner created a tragic public image, an aging Hollywood icon, once celebrated for a legendary love story, now officially suspected of involvement in his wife's death. The case had evolved from a decades-old Hollywood legend into an active, high-stakes homicide investigation that stopped just short of an arrest. The legal loop was tightening, but without a smoking gun, the final step remained frustratingly out of reach. With the case officially labeled undetermined, the public and forensic communities remain divided between two primary, competing theories. The first is the modified accident theory, which posits that a highly intoxicated Natalie Wood went to the deck to fix the banging dinghy line, lost her footing, and fell. In this version, her heavy down jacket quickly filled with water, rendering her helpless against the cold current while the noise of the generator drowned out her cries. The second, far more disturbing theory is the argument gone wrong scenario, fueled by the testimony of Captain Dennis Davern. This theory suggests that the furious fight between Wagner and Wood spilled onto the swim platform, resulting in her being pushed or falling into the sea during a physical struggle. Proponents of this view point to the bruises on her arms as clear evidence of a violent grip and suggest the delay in calling the Coast Guard was a deliberate attempt to let hypothermia do its work. There is also a third, middle ground theory, that Wagner did not push her, but discovered her in the water and intentionally delayed rescue efforts to teach her a lesson or avoid a massive scandal, miscalculating how quickly the cold would kill her. Each theory is supported by certain pieces of evidence and directly contradicted by others, creating a maddeningly perfect stalemate. The lack of direct eyewitness testimony to the exact moment she entered the water means that any conclusion requires a leap of faith. The truth remains suspended between an unfortunate mishap and a dark crime, a narrative chasm that has never been bridged. Every piece of data can be spun to support either innocence or guilt, leaving the ultimate answer tantalizingly out of reach. Perhaps the most haunting aspect of Natalie Wood's death is the profound, tragic irony that surrounded her lifelong fear of deep water. From her early childhood, Wood possessed a deep-seated, paralyzing aquaphobia, a fear that was nurtured by her superstitious mother, Maria Gurdon. Maria had famously warned her daughter to beware of dark water, predicting that she would meet her end by drowning in a dark place. This fear was solidified in 1949 when an 11-year-old Natalie fell from a collapsing bridge into a torrential river during the filming of the movie The Green Promise. The accident resulted in a fractured wrist that healed improperly, leaving her with a slight physical deformity she would carefully conceal with large bracelets throughout her adult life. Natalie spoke openly about this phobia in interviews, once stating, "I'm terrified of dark water, open water where you can't see the bottom." Yet, despite this consuming dread, she frequently spent weekends on a 60-foot yacht, surrounded by the very element that terrified her most, to please her husband's love for sailing. That she should die precisely in the manner she feared above all else, alone, in pitch-black ocean water, unable to see what lay beneath her, is a detail that lends the story a grim, almost mythic quality. It is this psychological contradiction that makes the accident theory so difficult for her sister, Lana Wood, and her closest friends to accept. They argue that her fear was so intense that she would never have willingly approached the edge of the boat alone at night. Her worst nightmare came to life in the waters of Blue Cavern, turning a maternal superstition into a horrifying, historical reality. Decades after that freezing November night, a cluster of critical, unanswered questions continues to prevent the case of Natalie Wood from finding peace. Why did Robert Wagner wait nearly 4 hours to contact the Coast Guard when his wife, who could not swim well and feared the water, vanished? What was the true nature of the injuries on her body, and could they have been sustained entirely within the confines of the yacht's cabin? What did Christopher Walken truly see or hear during those missing hours, and why has he maintained such a rigid, lifelong silence on the matter? Why did the initial 1981 investigation overlook the testimonies of nearby boaters who claimed to have heard a woman screaming for help in the darkness? The lack of clarity surrounding these pivotal points has allowed the mystery to fester, transforming a private tragedy into a permanent public fixation. Every official update seems to raise more questions than it answers, leaving behind a trail of fragmented truths and self-protective statements. Investigators admit that without a confession or new, irrefutable physical evidence, the true sequence of events on the stern of the Splendor will likely never be known. The passage of time has further complicated the quest for answers, as memories fade and key individuals grow older or pass away. The case file remains open at the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department, a stack of paper containing the unresolved remnants of a Hollywood legend's final night. The questions stand like sentinels around the mystery, refusing to grant closure to her family, her fans, or the history of cinema itself. The story of Natalie Wood's death remains one of the most haunting chapters in the annals of American pop culture, the intersection of glamour, jealousy, and dark water. She was a woman who lived her entire life under the bright lights of public adoration, only to perish in the absolute darkness of an isolated ocean cove. The yacht Splendor was eventually sold, changing hands multiple times before being broken up for scrap, a physical erasure of the floating stage where the tragedy occurred. Robert Wagner, now advanced in age, has never been charged with a crime, and the designation of person of interest remains a permanent, unresolved tag on his legacy. The waters off Catalina Island continue to roll into Blue Cavern just as they did in November 1981, indifferent to the secrets they swallowed that night. Natalie Wood's true legacy should be her brilliant contributions to the golden age of cinema, her timeless performances that continue to captivate audiences across generations. Yet, her name remains irrevocably tethered to the mystery of her final hours, a cinematic tragedy with an ending that will never be written. The case stands as a reminder that behind the polished veneer of Hollywood royalty lie the same fragile, messy human truths that haunt us all. As the credits roll on her life and this archive closes, we are left not with answers, but with the lingering echo of a cry for help carried away by the Pacific wind. The file remains open, the death certificate reads undetermined, and the true story of what happened to Natalie Wood remains safely locked within the vanished archive of that fateful night. Before you go, here's the thing. Every week we investigate another mystery the world could never solve. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one. And here's the most important part. The next case we investigate could be yours. Tell us in the comments which unsolved mystery, disappearance, or disaster we should cover next. We read every suggestion, and the stories that stay with you are the ones we bring to life.